now recognize myself for an opening statement. I welcome my colleagues to this important hearing, and I welcome our witnesses and thank them for being here today. The Fourth Amendment guarantees all Americans the right to be free of unreasonable government searches and seizures. With advances in technology, Americans' personal data has become easily tracked and collected, and the government can and does obtain this information without acquiring a warrant and without ever notifying an individual who is subject to a search. This is especially prevalent in the context of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Reports in recent years detail how the FBI, under the leadership of past FBI directors, abused its authorities under FISA. The FBI used its authorities under Section 702 of FISA to conduct millions of queries of U.S. person communications. At its peak, the FBI conducted nearly 3 million such searches in 2021. In recent years, those numbers have begun to decline, but the FBI still conducts thousands of U.S. person queries every month. These actions violate the privacy and civil liberties of Americans and likely infringe on their Fourth Amendment protections. I've called for serious reforms to FISA for years, and last Congress we undertook the task of attempting to rein in years of FISA abuses. Congress enacted a bill that included various reforms, such as new and heightened criminal and civil penalties for those who violate FISA. We significantly reduced the number of FBI personnel authorized to approve queries. We required audits of U.S. person queries and implemented many new reporting and transparency measures. But we must still work to protect the Fourth Amendment rights of all Americans. I introduced an amendment to require a warrant for all U.S. person queries. This amendment included various exceptions to allow the FBI and the intelligence community to do its vital work of defending our homeland while protecting Americans' privacy rights. This amendment had broad bipartisan support, and we worked closely with our colleagues across the aisle in an attempt to address this issue. I believe such a reform is necessary to end the abuses of Americans' rights, but reforming FISA itself is not enough. The government has plenty of other tools at its disposal to collect information on Americans. Currently, the laws governing how the Fourth Amendment is applied in the digital context is the Wild West. Key legislation in this space is the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, which was written in 1986 and did not take into account all the advances in digital communications that have occurred since. The iPhone, for example, did not show up for 2 decades after this law was written. These cell phones have become such an integral part of our lives that, as the Supreme Court has held, they now, quote, hold for many Americans the privacies of life, close quote. Federal agencies are able to sidestep the requirements of the Fourth Amendment and access and collect massive amounts of private information on Americans by exploiting a legal loophole in this act. Rather than obtain a warrant, government agencies like the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Internal Revenue Service, the Drug Enforcement Agency, and the Department of Homeland Security can simply turn to data brokers and purchase mass amounts of Americans' data. This includes such private information like location and health information and so on. Currently, with a disturbing amount of frequency, data brokers sell Americans' personal information to law enforcement and intelligence agencies without any court oversight, in contrast to strict rules that prevent phone companies and social media sites from selling such information to the government. We also are aware of reports of the federal government using facial recognition technology. This is a powerful tool that can be used to help solve crimes, but this technology also raises serious issues concerning First and Fourth Amendment rights. Law enforcement agencies could potentially use this technology to surveil individuals who are not engaged in any illegal activity whatsoever. For example, we've seen reports of ATF using facial recognition to find gun owners. The federal government has also turned to private companies like Clearview AI to purchase access to facial recognition technology. Clearview AI pulls publicly available photographs from social media sites and puts them into a database marketed to law enforcement. Clearview AI's founders call the service a search engine for faces. The Government Accountability Office has conducted studies of federal law enforcement entities' use of this technology in recent years. It found that federal law enforcement agencies had not properly assessed privacy and other risks associated with the use of this technology, and some did not even know which systems their agents were using. As technology continues to develop, the government has more and more information about Americans available to it. Used improperly, this will continue the pattern of government surveillance of U.S. citizens that we have fought so hard against. Congress must protect the privacy rights of Americans and uphold the guarantees of the Fourth Amendment. I look forward to this opportunity to discuss the dangers of mass surveillance and explore meaningful reforms. I appreciate our witnesses and the members for being here today and the public for attending as well. I now recognize Ranking Member of the entire committee, Mr. Raskin, for his opening statement.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman Biggs, and thanks to our distinguished witnesses for joining us here today. The Fourth Amendment guarantees the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. That right is the same today as it was when it was written centuries ago, but the facts on the ground have obviously changed. Members of Congress didn't have cell phones in their pockets. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have email. The times have changed, and while the constitutional right to privacy has not changed, new technologies make it a lot harder to rein in government intrusion in the lives of the people. Artificial intelligence turbocharges surveillance capabilities by sifting through mountains of personal data in seconds. Data brokers aggregate and re-identify so-called de-identified data bought from apps and then sold to others, including the government, allowing them real-time access to Americans' location, purchasing habits, and healthcare needs. And cameras equipped with facial recognition technology can scan a crowd and instantaneously pick out specific people, whether law enforcement targets or undocumented immigrants, you name it, all without a warrant. In an 1829 speech at the Virginia Constitutional Convention, Madison said to his colleagues, "The essence of government is power, and power lodged as it must be in human hands will ever be liable to abuse." The U.S. government has broad surveillance authorities. When properly implemented, they keep us safe from terrorists and foreign adversaries and gangs, but such broad grants of power are also fertile ground for abuse. I believe Congress has a duty to balance the government's need for Americans' private data with our rights. I have voted in favor of government surveillance authorities when they do not trespass on our constitutional rights, and I voted against them when they don't. We obviously need to keep ourselves safe, both from criminals and fraudsters who would do us harm, as well as those in power who would violate our freedom. When we last reauthorized Section 702 of FISA, which allows warrantless collection of the communications of non-U.S. persons located overseas, including when those people are interacting with Americans, our solution to that tension between privacy and security was to establish more checks on the government. Congress previously imposed rules dictating when the FBI can search for Americans identifying information in the 702 databases, but we know those rules had been honored only in the breach. Rather than review a sampling of those U.S. person searches, the FBI's National Security Division now must audit every search for the communications of an American. These watchdogs within the FBI and in other government agencies are an essential line of defense against government overreach. But the problem today is that President Trump has fired all of those people. A week after he was sworn in, President Trump fired every Democratic member of the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board. This is the board created by Congress in 2004 to make sure the government does not violate American civil liberties in the name of keeping us safe. The work of these Democratic members had been lauded even by Republican members of our committee who recognized and shared their commitment to protecting our rights against government overreach. Trump has left the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board with only one member, a single member who's been stripped of all authority because the board needs a quorum, which is 3, to act. She cannot issue recommendations on Section 702 U.S. person searches. She cannot hold public meetings. Without the fired members, it's as though the board simply doesn't even exist. But the president did not stop there. Remember those monthly audits of every single U.S. person search of the 702 database? He removed the individual responsible for managing that and rescinded offers extended to those who had been recruited to help her. So Congress cannot receive the audit reports required by law because there's simply nobody left to audit these warrantless searches, much less provide the mandatory report to Congress, which is why I'm also concerned about all the other things that have been done to remove the safeguards around Americans' right to privacy against government invasion. The president fired at least 17 inspectors general, dismantled the Cyber Safety Review Board, and removed the director of the NSA, the person in charge of collecting 702 data responsibly and within statutory limitations. Just last week, He fired the four-star general in charge of the NSA and U.S. Cyber Command with other high-ranking security officials because, according to reports, Laura Loomer told him to do that. In a system that works, surveillance and privacy are inextricably tied and made consistent. Those conducting surveillance understand the threat both to the country and its civil liberties, and thus apply the rules in a precise and disciplined way. Ben Franklin famously said that those who give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Well, Trump has defied even Ben Franklin, because in 78 days, we have lost both privacy and safety. We are less safe and we're less free than we were on January 19th, 2025. President Trump and those he's placed in charge of the FBI, like Kash Patel, have talked about using the power of government to visit retribution on anyone the president sees as an enemy. Over the last 78 days, we've watched the administration attack journalists, the free press, colleges, peaceful protesters, members of Congress, lawyers and law firms, even federal judges, because they have countered his assault on the rights and freedoms of the people. Never have I felt more concerned about the extremely broad, warrantless surveillance powers that have been entrusted to the executive branch. Chairman Jordan and I have disagreed about various things in the past, but I must say he has shown commendable and strong leadership and worked across the aisle to ensure that Republicans and Democrats alike understand the dangers of unchecked government surveillance, and the times bear him out. I am looking forward to working with him closely on a bipartisan basis in this set of hearings in the lead up to the expiration of FISA Section 702 next year to stand up for all American civil liberties. I thank him for his leadership. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan, for his
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act allows government to conduct surveillance of foreigners, as the title would suggest, outside of the United States for intelligence information. Okay, that's all well and good. We like that. They get that information, they bring it in this giant database, this what I call the haystack of information, and then they do queries, which is a fancy word for search. And they search Americans, American phone numbers, names, email addresses. They search America. They call it queries, but a query is a fancy name. Query is a fancy name for search. 3 million times they did it in 2021. And here's the kicker. The FBI, when they did all these searches, didn't even follow their own rules. You don't have to take our word for it. The Inspector General said 278,000 times the FBI didn't even follow their rules for conducting these searches on Americans, not foreigners. So the ranking member's right. We got 12 months from now when we get a chance to go at this issue again. We were close last time. We lost the warrant requirement in a vote, 212 to 212. I'm going to do everything, and I know the chairman is, and I appreciate the ranking member's comments. We're going to do everything we can to make sure we have that warrant requirement. Here's the way it works in our country. If you're an American citizen and the government wants to go look at your stuff, they got to go to a separate and equal branch of government and get a warrant. It's pretty simple. That's what we want, plain and simple. And we were one vote away from passing it in the House. Who knows what would have happened in the Senate? But I know I'm committed. I know the chairman of the subcommittee is committed, and the ranking member, I appreciate what he's done over the years in defending the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and we look forward to working with him on this issue. We need to do this to protect American citizens and stick with, as the ranking member said, the way it's always worked. You want to look at someone's stuff? Go get a warrant. Go to a separate branch of government, get a warrant. That's how probable cause. And here's the other thing. We even put exceptions in there. Exigent circumstances, something really bad's going to happen, or you give permission because there's some cyber attack on you or your company. We put exceptions in there. We'll put them back in again. Sometimes I thought we put too many exceptions. We'll do it again, but we got to win. We got to win this issue 12 months from now, April. I forget the date in April, but it's April next year, and we got to make sure we win this. And I appreciate the chairman bringing our witnesses here. Thank you for coming and having this hearing on this very important, fundamental issue for the American people. I yield back.